Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, brought to you by Techstrong and Plutora. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting presentation ahead of us, but first, I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of the discussion or you'd like to share or rewatch, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live webinar today. If you have any questions for our speakers, I want you to direct those to the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. And for any other comments you'd like to make, and if you'd like to join our discussion, we can do that through the chat tab, which is also on the right side of your screen. We have a couple of polls throughout today's webinar, one near the beginning and two near the end, so we really want your participation for those. The slides are also available for download using the Handouts tab on the right side of the screen, so feel free to download those. I'll also point your attention to a yellow sticky message located at the top of the chat. By clicking the sticky message, you can pre-order the ebook for Value Stream Management, an ideal framework for continuous security. And finally, at the conclusion of our webinar, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around. So the webinar topic today is VSM, an ideal framework for continuous security dashboards. And I'm joined today by Mark Hornby, CEO of Engineering DevOps Consulting, and Bob Davis, CMO of Plutora. And it's my pleasure at this point in time to turn the floor over to our speakers today. Both of you, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you very much, Cody. Appreciate it. We are so excited about this. This story is, as Mark likes to say, this story needs to be told. It's timely from all the chaotic activities in the world. You have President Biden talking about increased threats in the world. Security is as top of mind now as it ever was. And continuous security is a wonderful concept, which I first heard really in my discussions with our guest speaker today, Mark Hornby. Mark is quite accomplished in the security business. I want to introduce Mark. I think the DevOps.com audience, the Techstrong audience here, has an awareness of Mark, but you may not be as aware as you might be about Mark's strong pedigree in the security space. So, Mark, why don't you give us some sense of your experience here?
Hey, Bob, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to get the story out. I appreciate it. Yeah, my experience in security really has been driven just from a lifetime of knowledge of working with real live clients and real live development as well as operations teams. I have to admit my experience goes back, according to my IEEE card, 47 years. And even some of the early activities were involving security problems, working with network operators that had breaches, and we had to deal with that and introduce software changes to help with in production security issues. In that case, it had a lot to do with credentials management and protections from that point of view. But that's kind of where things go back from those days. I've spent most of my career looking at the problems of development, delivery, and in production management of large complex systems. So today I'm a consultant. I work with enterprises, network manufacturers, service providers, institutions of various sizes, including military and other high security situations, and large financial institutions. So I kind of look at security from two angles. One is the preventative type of security problems, where you're trying to prevent security issues creeping in through your supply chain or through your own development work, and making sure that your development processes are taking care of that, and minimizing the possibility of deploying vulnerabilities to production. So on the preventative side, if you like. And then also after release to production, and in production activities are more of the defensive type of security, where you have to worry about perimeter security, in production credentials management, and in production scanning of activities to look for unusual activities and things like that. So what I have learned is there's no such thing as 100% security, just like there's no such thing as 100% quality. So the problem of keeping up with these increasing security concerns that are occurring in the world is, you got to be on top of it. You've got to look at it as a continuous problem, not something you just deploy a security, system or controls to deal with and then forget it. It's an ongoing issue. So collaborating with many security experts over the years, which continues, that's what it's all about. Try to get the best information available on the table and the best controls, and make it, a continuous improvement, which is really where this idea of continuous security comes in, to tie in the preventative aspects and the, defensive aspects in one continuous improvement effort. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Should have turned that off. Anyway, yeah. So in terms of, this topic, the dashboard, one of the key issues is getting, quick, rapid response and visibility on what's going on across the whole spectrum of development, as well as, the production activities. And that's really where the, having an enterprise-wide dashboard is important. I see a lot of SIEMs, security experts are looking at more for the production end, the defensive side, but more recently, I think more of them are starting to think about the development side as well, and the supply chains and the deliveries. And the dashboard is something that I find is very helpful for that. I have a client right now I'm working with on a dashboard very similar to the one we're talking about in this presentation. So it's really, really important. I've also been involved in creating a security course for the Department of Homeland Security, called Sec DevOps, which is kind of a security-focused genre of DevSecOps. So definitely lots of involvement in security over the years.
Yeah, I think the notion of continuous security is a natural extension of what we've been talking about: continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous testing. I mean, the notion of having security in the mindset from the very beginning of the development process, and then keeping it there well past its production life, and really keeping an eye on it, seems to make complete sense to me. So, and I believe it's so part and parcel to the concept that it's actually included in as a concept in the book you wrote, Engineering DevOps. So there's lots of materials, not to mention the ebook, which Cody mentioned up front. I'll point your attention to it again. Excuse me, which we will have available here in a couple of weeks, which will cover this topic as well. And speaking of this topic, what is it? We're going to get a bunch of stuff out there to learn. Mark, what kind of things? Maybe you can just give a quick overview of what people can expect here.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, enterprise, and you did too, enterprises are increasingly concerned with security. There's a need for clearer visibility over the different sorts of security threats and preventative measures to reduce vulnerabilities, reduce the chance for exploits of software deliveries, and also in production defense. So the webinar will basically explain what continuous security is, why an enterprise security dashboard is important, what role that can play. Enterprise security visibility challenges will be explained. We'll provide guidance on how to assess your continuous security dashboard requirements, and how to use value stream management platforms to realize a continuous security dashboard solution.
I think that's really interesting. As we go through the webinar, I think you'll see, even without having it pointed out, you'll see the parallels between the requirements of continuous security and the capabilities of value stream management, and how they can really come together to ultimately provide a pretty robust solution. But before we dive into that, I think we might want to do a poll to get a quick level set of where we are with security and continuous security and security dashboards and so forth. So Cody, if you want to go and give us the poll.
Sure. So the question is, to what extent are you familiar with security visibility dashboard solutions? A, not sure or don't know. B, little experience with security dashboards for either production environments or DevSecOps environments. C, experience with SIEM dashboards monitoring security-related logs and events in production. Or D, experience with security dashboards that provide visibility that covers everything from pre-production DevSecOps to in-production security.
I think it'll be interesting to see where people are coming from. My experience as I talk to folks, we get a lot of people from the DevSecOps side, we get people from the SRE. It's that notion of stitching those together that we're going to be diving into today. And it'd be interesting to see some of those results. Mark, what would you expect to see on a poll like such as this in these days?
Well, fundamentally, this idea of integrating security has been talked about a lot, but a lot of people are still trying to get their arms around it. So I think, I would expect that at least the people joining a call like this are here to learn. So they're going to be at the fairly beginner's level, is my guess. Most part, little experience. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there we go. So big chunk of people, just as you were expecting. Okay. So given that, and we got a lot of people just starting down this path in terms of the continuous security aspect. So let's we'll dive right in then and see it happen. Okay. Mark, here's an image we see a lot with the infinity curve of DevOps, but we're layering continuous security. So maybe you can dive in a little bit more about what this is actually talking about.
Yeah. So again, there's no industry standard definition for continuous security. I think I might have been the first one to coin the phrase in the book in 2019, because everybody was talking about DevSecOps and rugged DevOps and different things. But the term continuous security, even to this day, is not really a standard.
Yeah.
But there are some definitions out there by now. They mostly refer to DevSecOps rather than what I'm referring to as a little bit of a broader view of what it means. So, end-to-end security practices are really still suffering from siloed practices. The idea that the ops side and the dev side are still, a little bit disconnected quite often in real enterprises. So the software development end is really, what DevSecOps is all about. I mean, it has ops in the word, but really DevSecOps really talks about how do you get to a production, but not informing very much about what happens after production. And so it's really securing the delivery pipeline and deliveries to production. Well, really the software operations teams are more concerned about what happens in production. So the modern day operations teams are site reliability engineers, and they're concerned about securing the production environments after deployment. DevSecOps doesn't really say a whole lot about that. So meanwhile, the software security teams tend to be a separate silo, focusing their expertise, again, primarily with what's going on in production, because that's their live, day-to-day world, if you like. But they need, they're starting to realize they need to care a lot about what's going on in development as well, and looking at DevSecOps practices. The bad actors that are trying to take advantage of these security vulnerabilities, they don't see, those boundaries, although they realize that there are these silos, and they're essentially, open cracks that they can use to get into an organization. If you look at things like the SolarWinds attack, where the deployed software was exploited through some weaknesses in the way the product had been, the secrets had been managed in the development of that product, and then as the product was deployed to real networks, the actors got through that door to get to the live networks. So that was a case where the development side and the production side needed to be coordinated a little better, for sure. So therefore, I define security as a combined set of DevSecOps, if you like, preventative practices, together with the SRE type, in production, SRE ops, if you want to call it, protection of the production environment practices. So together, that's continuous security, and the implication is that the security teams have a broader focus, more of an end-to-end focus, that are as coaches and collaborators across both the dev side and the production side. So to me, that's a better, definition, if you like, of continuous security, at least an explanation of what it refers to be continuous across the entire spectrum of things from dev through to production.
It just makes such complete sense to me, and as we've been in the market at Plutora, and Plutora obviously provides a value stream management solution and a number of capabilities therein. It's the silos that are being connected together, that are being removed by the value of value stream management, connecting the handoffs as code and value flows through the value chain. You have the same issue with security. You have to be able to remove those silos and be able to have that really be one system thinking in terms of what's going on in production and what's coming down the pipe from development, and connecting those together is a big deal. And in fact, in just normal code delivery, that connection of the ops and the dev really brought about a lot of continuous improvement, because now I was able to see what was going on in production and apply it right back to the dev, and immediately have insight into what's going on, and have a continuous process of getting better. I see the value relative to security to be profound in the same way. So I think, we're starting to see the parallels that I alluded to with fire stream management, already just in the very beginning of this.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'd point out is a lot of the security certifications you can get are really focused still on the traditional kind of view of security. If you get, CCSP and some of those other security, credentials you can get, the courses you can attend and get certified, that they haven't yet fully, embraced the DevSecOps concepts. So a lot of these certs are kind of still disconnected as well. They're not really looking at the total picture.
And to the extent that those disconnections cause, seams in the armor that is surrounding the security armor that is surrounding the organization, bad things can happen. And we know it's important, but let's just kind of look at some of these numbers are staggering, Mark.
Yeah, and concerning for sure. I mean, these are just examples that you can Google 5 seconds and you'll find a lot of different examples of security concerns. But the log for shell issue certainly startled a lot of people recently. A lot of dev people and security people and DevOps people had to jump on that, and it took weeks to apply patches and resolve the concerns that came out of that one item alone. That's just a recent example.
Yeah, I think your son had a front row seat on that. If I'm not
mistaken. That's true. I was mentioning that offline, that one of my sons is actually a security, DevOps, and SRE all combined in one guy, actually. And he was relaying to me some of the challenges he was having and trying to get the patches across all their different servers and the enterprise that he's working in. So that's a prime example where, code vulnerabilities coming in from the dev side can be taken advantage of and exploited in production. In that case, that was deployed to literally, tens of millions of downloads. So it's a major impact. NIST, among others, certainly NIST is one of the more popular ones to look for vulnerabilities. At last count, they had more than 20,000 known vulnerabilities, of which, by the way, there's only something like 4,500 fixes known. So there's a lot of known vulnerabilities that people can still take advantage of that don't really even have fixes, and that continues rapidly over the years. I think that was at least a 10% growth since the year before. So getting people to focus on applying those changes and improvements that are at least available is a high priority, and making sure that's part of your your development backlog activities and also production activities to deploy the patches. And there's a lot of costs involved. So the New Yorker article is just an example. Even for individuals, if you get hit with a ransomware attack, it's often if 6 figures at least being asked. So it's, and at the corporate level, it's a heck of a lot more. So Forbes also mentioned that just data breaches alone, in 2020, affected, if you add it all up, essentially 280 million people through these corporations, and the costs were on average to repair those $1.8 million a minute. So there's certainly a lot of reasons why we do want to care about security. Security is often top of mind for a lot of CIOs and even CEOs these days. One security breach gets you in the news, and that can have a bigger impact than even a major software quality problem because of the backlash from social media and clients if they see you have a security breach.
It's just huge. It can put somebody out of business, and not to mention cost money. So we know it's important, and we know kind of the overall concept. Let's dive in, Mark, and start to look at actually what it is.
Yeah. So when you talk about dashboards in particular, say security dashboards. Most people in the security field will say, "Oh yeah, well we have lots of dashboards. We have this, security information and event management systems, and we draw our data from that and put it on a dashboard." So a lot of security experts are proud of their suite of SIEM dashboards, which is great, right? But most of them are basically dashboards derived from vendor products that traditionally are looking at in production type security controls and activities, which is great, but they're not really encompassing the whole suite of things in this modern DevOps world, where the value stream starts at planning and goes all the way to production. So really, the idea of a continuous security dashboard is to encompass the entire value stream across many value streams, in fact, because enterprises have typically hundreds of pipelines and value streams going on to service their their clients across their different software platforms and products. So a continuous security dashboard provides a consolidated view, to show the big picture, to understand your security landscape from beginning to end. So it does, in my view, is quite a different set of requirements than a traditional SIEM. SIEMs could potentially grow up and do more than this, but you need to have access to the controls across the entire spectrum of activities. So combining development and production controls in particular within a single dashboard, providing analytics that look at that whole spectrum of things in a comprehensive end-to-end viewpoint is what a security dashboard, a continuous security dashboard is all about.
I mean, this looks awfully simple, but the complexities are pretty significant. I mean, if I put eyeballs on the right side of this diagram and look at the security, my view of what I need to look at, what I'm concerned about, the kinds of people I'm worried about is different than if I put the eyeballs on the left side and just the whole approach. And then tying that together into a single dashboard with the flexibility to add value on both ends of that is both very powerful, but I'm left wondering, how that looks and how we put it together. And I know, Mark, you've spent some time on an architecture here. So as complicated as this looks, we're going to spend just a couple of minutes to kind of walk through this and maybe do some use cases just to really have it come to life. But this is an enterprise dashboard, security dashboard architecture, Mark, that you provided. So it's a lot here. This is complicated. Help us out here. Walk through the details.
Yeah, no doubt that security is not a simple issue, and to have a dashboard that, at a glance gives different kinds of stakeholders the viewpoints they need on, the whole spectrum of security controls that are relevant to their individual jobs. You really do need to have a well-designed, architected system, or you can easily architect yourself into a corner by just focusing on one thing or another. So the problem of having a continuous security dashboard is really start with a comprehensive view of what the end goals and end use cases are really going to be, right? So depending on whether you're an executive, a dev manager, an engineer, ops manager, SRE, different auditors, security experts, they all have their own slice and dice of, the types of information they need for their particular roles. They don't, individually care how they get it, but they do want accurate, reliable, real-time information. To get that, you need to have essentially an architecture that has tentacles, if you like, and access telemetry, if you like, right down to the detailed and varied security controls across the whole spectrum of the value stream. So if you look at the diagram, you kind of think of it as two layers, that there's an upper user end facing layer in the architecture. So the smart user interface layer, if you like, and then there's a breakpoint. This probably should have a dotted line there. Come to think of it, the API layer, where everything underneath is providing data for the smart UI layer, and then having a consistent set of APIs is key, so that you can have the same information available and consumed by the different types of users easily. Gathering all the data across the entire enterprise for all these platforms and pipelines and value streams, both the dev side and the ops side, you need to have a really comprehensive data lake strategy where you're gathering all that data in real time in a reliable way, corporate data lake. And then in turn that, you need to gather that information from different kinds of collectors, the different tools and controls that are within the DevSecOps environment, as well as the SRE environment, to get it all pulled together. And those collectors need to be reliable. So it's not just a matter of getting access to data, but getting it quick and getting it reliable is something that a lot of people don't think about. Unfortunately, too many dashboard creators are more worried about the presentation layer rather than the importance of how it's all structured underneath. But the presentation layer is important. You want to have a lot of flexibility as you get more and more mature. What you want to look at is you're going to get more sophisticated. So you do want your dashboards to be flexible, and over time, more summaries and analysis as you get better and better at this. So that smart UI layer isn't just serving up the presentation of the dashboard. It's actually, a lot of algorithms and analysis going on in there as you get better and better at it. You can only imagine if you've got maybe hundreds of security controls for even one value stream. When you aggregate it for many value streams and everything that's going on in production, you've got a lot of things to look at. So you're going to need to get smarter and smarter at kind of providing an observability platform to analyze all those data streams and figure out what you're really going to present to the different stakeholders so they can take action. In addition, you also have applications, if you want to do synthetic security management, or maybe something more advanced like chaos security engineering, where you're literally proactively, if you like, disturbing your development and production environments on purpose to determine, threats and how you can learn from that for continuous learning point of view. It's not showing the dash in this diagram so much, but you can have applications also as essentially users of those APIs. You want to be able to test the whole system. So those APIs are also critical from that point of view. You want to be able to apply test programs to make sure that your systems are continuously healthy, and you can run tests on the system that way. So you really need to, really engineer an entire architecture. What struck me though was when I first saw, some of the slides from Plutora, frankly, were my first introduction to value stream management platforms. I was struck by the similarity of this structure and what I see in the value stream management platform structure. It's almost a one-to-one structure. We'll talk about that later, but fundamentally, this is in my experience, the way to do this. I have a project right now implementing a dashboard like this for a large enterprise, a large financial institution. And we're going through all the process of implementing the collectors, the different stakeholder views, and the smart UI layer, the data model for the data lake. The whole project is about a 6 months effort to get all of this right, and a lot of collaboration between the different platform teams in the organization, in the enterprise. Is a pretty big effort. But once you get there, you now have, like I say, stakeholder specific real-time views of the entire spectrum of events from across the whole value stream for many value streams. That's extremely valuable.
Yeah, I think the infrastructure to power this can be daunting. Mm-hmm. And you're right. When I had the same reaction when I saw this, although from the other perspective, I was like, wow, this looks just like value stream management. We think of value stream management in 3 layers, and they apply directly to this, and we'll illustrate this at the end when we kind of bring it all together. But you have to have the integration layer on the bottom, and that is critical to bring in all the data and connecting to all the tools, as you have noted. We have that as well, and a lot of these connections are already in place and people are using it. It becomes just a flavor of the data that we've got to add to the integration rather than come up with a way to do integration. So that problem is established, and there are organizations in the market, vendors in the market that have a lot to say about integrations. There's whole business there. Sitting on top of that is the common data model, which we refer to. You've got data lake here. We refer to it as a common data model. That is critical. It allows you to see all the data that's coming from those connectors in a normalized, consistent way. So I can start to map and look at things in a cause and effect kind of methodology. And that powers a control plane to where I can actually orchestrate things, move things around, whether that's security information and vulnerability data, or whether that's code artifacts and release orchestration efforts. Either way, and many other examples, I can move that through. Sitting on top of that, the third layer is the analytics and metrics, which are served up through the UI. Those are fundamentally a component of the value stream management architecture. And when we bring it together at the end, you'll see how we can actually, working with a value stream management solution, hand in hand to solve some of the infrastructure plumbing here, and then really get creative with how the data is served up, not only through that dashboard, but to the various roles. It's very powerful.
You mentioned use cases as well. I mean, I can give you a real example, right? By having a dashboard like that is comprehensive like this, you can be looking at activity in production and notice, hey, for this particular platform, we're getting a lot of attacks at the moment. Let's go back and see what we've been doing from the preventative point of view in development. Did we run the scans recently? Have we, what were the results in development? And, did we look at the software composition analysis properly for that particular platform? If not, we better deploy the patches immediately because we're starting to see some attacks in production. So this is a way you can kind of use this dashboard to, collaborate across the entire value stream, looking at production threats to affect the development activity to reduce the vulnerabilities in those areas that are being threatened.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I just love this solution, and the benefits are many. Starting with business and operational, there's a ton of benefits, and you've mentioned a few here, Mark. You want to just highlight a couple others?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, almost any dashboard has a lot of benefits. It's almost like, the benefits of having sight, personally, right? I've had some experience with eye surgeries. I know the importance of sight from firsthand, but in general, if you think about process, it's the same thing. If you can't see, what's going on, then you won't know what is going on and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. On the other hand, with good visibility, you now have intelligence information that you can use your intelligence to deal with. It's almost that simple. So the dashboards provide you all the data across the whole value stream to gather that you'll need to make decisions, much more than just a traditional SIEM that's looking at certain controls, and at the operations level there's many benefits, just to feel like a continuous source of truth for all the development, production, and security stakeholders across the whole value stream. You can make more intelligent decisions, risk analysis, which will drive your backlog priorities of what you're going to do, whether that's development activities or it may be production, activities as well.
The visibility you get is gives you the opportunity to do all that, and if you don't have it, you get lots of the counter arguments. The counter impact is bad things happen when you don't have that insight, that visibility.
Absolutely, yeah. It can have very severe impacts on the business if you're not taking care of security, as we've seen from some of the prior slides. So if you don't have a consistent view between the ops team and the devs team, then you're going to have problems with collaborating on trying to get priority towards implementing solutions. Instead of focusing on the issue, you're going to spend a lot of time just trying to align with each other. That's not a good thing when you're having a real-time security problem to deal with.
Similar to the issues, to any of the issues that are caused by the silos, the impact can be very extreme, however, because given the topic here of security. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a lot of personas, there's a lot of stakeholders that care a lot about security, from from the idea to the production environment. Obviously there are, but that puts requirements on the dashboard to be able to serve up information that is appropriate to their perspective. So, these are some of those perspectives. I think it's interesting to look at the very different requirements in terms of what that smart UI has to serve up to the people that care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the executives need to understand from a overall organization point of view where there are issues in their big picture organization, who to direct to do what when they see issues, or at least understand day by day where there may be some concerns that need to be actioned, and then the individual other roles in the organization need the information specific to their job to monitor the right things, integrate and act on the right things in the different tool chains and parts of the value stream and the production environments that they're responsible for, whether you're a DevSecOps engineer, SRE, security engineer. There's a lot of different slices of information needed, but you all want to be working from a common database so that you've got a common source of truth. So you're all working from the same, database.
Yeah. And that disconnected people and teams, and we've had some things occur, with pandemics and all sorts of things. So now not only do we have disconnected teams, but we have remote teammates. We have people operating in their homes, just like we are today. And we have to put a security blanket over all of that. It's really complicated.
Yeah, this slide is really like maybe a little bit of a funny but real use case. Unfortunately, I see it all too often where people have to react to a security event, and it almost without a really consistent, consolidated view of what is going on across the organization, it causes like almost a calamity of communication issues. Managers want to know what the heck's going on. The SRE teams need, they're crying for help from dev, and the dev teams are saying, "Hey, I'm busy. I've got too much to do already. What are you asking me for?" The DevSecOps teams, don't have the expertise sometimes, so they're wondering, what are we supposed to do? They don't have the diagnostic information, and meanwhile, the security team's saying, "What's all the fuss? Obviously, we just need to deal with this issue because it's a security issue." Because so basically, it's an unfortunate series of communication events if you don't have a consistent view across the enterprise at the levels that are appropriate for the different types of stakeholders.
Yeah. And so then you connect them, and this is a perfect example. You have the same benefits that you get from tying tickets together to understand, defects and issues, to the security capabilities that are warning about breaches.
This one is really near and dear to my heart, this specific example. I mean, in general, you want your production side tools and dev side tools to be consistent enough that you can communicate information with each other in a way that makes sense with the tools that you're using in production and in dev. But this particular example is, as a summer student, which admittedly was a long time ago, 1977, I was given the job of this very use case, right, where we had a separate ticket system on the production side and from the dev side. And my job as a summer student was to come up with a solution to this. We wanted to have a common database. So, and that was my job, to come up with a single database that both sides could use. And, now how many years later, I still see the same problem, right? The ops side wants to use something like I'm not complaining about any tool, by the way, but something like ServiceNow. The dev side wants to use Jira, and you're constantly trying to get information back and forth between different systems. And meanwhile, your customers are complaining, or you got a security fire going on. And this type of issue, really is important. How do you get consistency, or at least information flow between the different kinds of tools, is a real issue.
So it's such a clear requirement just in dev in general, and connecting those two tools together. For example, Jira and ServiceNow is something that we provide solutions for, and almost 100% of our customers, not quite, but very high percentage. So applying the security data into that seems like the obvious thing to do.
Yeah.
And then, being able to recreate them. This is really kind of about being able to recreate things, making sure that your pre-prod environments and testing environments accurately reflect what's going on in production, so I can recreate and remediate issues that come up. Isn't that about right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's key. And that ties in your environment management and testing and vulnerability scanning. And that's pretty critical. And then that has to get served up in unique and different metrics depending on what people are looking at.
Exactly.
So pretty straightforward at that point. The collectors and the data lake are pretty important. We certainly have that common data model in VSM, but what do you think the security overlay does to that process? I think would complicate it, Mark, or what would you say?
Well, I would only say there's a lot of plugins. If you take a tip, one of the more popular, let's say the take an example of DevOps tools. One of the more popular ones is Jenkins. And so there's a lot of dashboard tools out there and plugins for that, but many of them have looked at the traditional, DevOps metrics, DORA metrics, but they don't explicitly cover the security metrics, so they need to be extended. So the point is that your collectors, really need to be designed with the security type of applications in mind. It's not just a matter of looking at lead time or, those are important, all right, frequency of release, but you need to look at also give just equal importance to some of the security scans results and in the dashboards and the things that are relevant to security on the dev side. And similarly on the ops side, look at metrics that are having to do with deployment to production, not just perimeter security controls or credentials and secrets controls, but understanding what's being deployed. So tying those together, making sure the collectors are gathering all the information so that you have the data in this data lake to work with is the point of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And those integrations need to be secure. That API is critical.
Yeah. I mean, you could implement the system I mentioned without an API layer, but you'd lose a lot of needs as you mature. You want to be able to use the the data lake and underlying collectors in more sophisticated ways over time. So I'm all about making sure you put in the right architecture in the first place. You're going to have a lot of different use cases as you build up the system to take advantage of through the APIs. It's not only about dashboards, frankly. The dashboards are your visibility tool, but once you have visibility, you want to take some actual actions. So that's I could almost entitle this whole presentation. It's not just about the dashboard itself; it's about the dashboard architecture.
Yeah.
And the framework.
Mm-hmm. Well, the integrations are core. And then that data comes in. Once I have the data cubes and the data, metrics that I want, there are lots of ways to slice and dice it, and that becomes, the flavor of what the organization is actually doing. So that the security capabilities match their requirements.
Well, that's one of the common, I feel like, pillars of practice for both dev side and DevOps and SRE is they both focus on automation, maybe from two different points of view, but collaborating on automation around security use cases is where this becomes extremely valuable.
Yeah. Well, and it needs to, you need to have real time. You need to be able to connect, watch things as they occur. And in my experience, real-time information, real-time data, real-time dashboards add yet another level of complexity to the architecture. So to your point about getting that set up right the first time, it's critical to be able to provide this level of reaction time, right? I mean, that's core. What good is it to understand a security breach that happened yesterday?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the neat thing about DevOps, DevSecOps is it does give you responsiveness. So if you do see something, a lot of activity, usually a security breach is preceded by activity, people looking for vulnerabilities, and they're scanning your networks and things like that. And you're going to get some warning. Maybe not a lot of warning. I mean, right now in the country, I know people are worried about breaches because of what's going on in Ukraine, for example. So you need to quickly take that data and figure, okay, what can we do from the dev side to, cut off the bad actors before they actually act.
Yeah, really important. And then, the capability to start to get into some synthetic monitoring, evaluate your system against the various breaches and the reactions it might drive. What if analysis? I mean, we hear that just in DevOps in general, just in release. What if I move this application to the cloud? What if I add this automation? What's the impact on my cycle time? What's the impact on the defects leaking to production? Whatever. Now, what's the impact on the security capabilities if I make certain compromises, changes, additions, whatever I might be doing in my pipeline, in my value stream? Seems like this would be pretty critical as we move forward to really being that preventative capability.
Well, in general, a lot of my clients I've noticed over the years, a lot of them are getting more mature with their DevOps practice. They're learning more about DevSecOps, integrating security controls. The SRE side, frankly, most of them are still in a transition mode, trying to understand all the different SRE practices and getting expert at that. There's a lot of traditional ops practices going on, but one of the more mature, advanced practices for associated with SRE is what's called chaos engineering, and applying chaos engineering principles and practices to security is equally important. Being able to get visibility over, what happens when you deliberately try to, if you like, interrupt your production environment with security breaches, having a way of testing that and then affecting what's going on in development and your supply chains to close those gaps that you're finding yourself through synthetic monitoring type applications.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that this kind of capability, having this kind of capability would be the characteristic of a pretty mature environment relative
Mm-hmm.
to security.
Yes.
If we were to do, and we will, this strikes me as an area where we might be able to dive into a number of different topics on the SRE and DevSecOps side.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the
but that does underscore, I just add, that does underscore the importance of having the architecture right in the first place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can kind of architect yourself into a corner. Again, that's a reason for having that API layer and a very generic data model. It's possible to come up with a dashboard, but not have this built in, and then you have to go back and re-engineer and unengineer some of the architecture if you haven't thought about these more advanced topics in the first place.
What percent of the organization, I know you haven't done a formal survey to my knowledge at least, but what percent of organizations do you think are at a maturity level that this is a conversation they're having right now?
It's early days, probably less than, I would guess less than 20% of the bulk of the enterprises and organizations I'm dealing with are looking at continuous security engineering programs, but they're starting to. A lot of them are still trying to figure out how to do basic IT ops automation, setting service level objectives, and often they don't even have an SLOs for security, even though that is a customer oriented concern. So it's still early days, but I would predict that over the next few years, it's going to get more and more important.
I would think that solving the visibility from idea to through to production in the context of security and removing those seams would be really important, and also would enable some automated responses, not only in the case of the synthetic monitoring we talked about where we're doing some what if analysis, but some capabilities that the system is auto healing from a security perspective. That's pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah. So once you do find a hole, a security hole, if you like, or vulnerability, then if as much as possible you want to take action immediately, and that requires automation, orchestration, automatically put up, alarm the right people, if you like, notify the right people, set up, postmortems around, even if it's an internally driven event, to really look at that immediately. Maybe adjusting some controls in the pipeline. Maybe you want to change the checkers that are being used during the scans to bias them a little more towards the types of things that are actually more, higher threats at the moment. That's a dynamic kind of DevOpsy thing. Even the security controls can be ephemeral. We talk about, infrastructure being ephemeral, but even things like security controls can be ephemeral. So if you've got the right, dynamics and automation around it, you can automatically adjust your security profiles for your tools according to what the threats are at the moment.
Yeah, pretty powerful. Mm-hmm. So how do you figure out what you want? This is a classic tool that comes out of your consulting market. People might be familiar with the concept, but let's talk about the requirements prioritization that would go into assessing an individual or a corporate's requirement here.
Yeah, honestly, this little tool, I use this kind of approach for many things, and if anybody ever goes on my website, they'll see I have a lot of little calculators and things like this. In general, it's almost like any topic. Figure out what are the practices or features that are important for whatever the topic is. In this case, security. How important is it to you at this time? what is your current capability, and that can be used to calculate a gap score across a list of practices and concerns, and then the gap score can then direct you where you should make improvements, because we're dealing with complex systems. At any point in time, the question is, what do we do now? Nobody has an unlimited resource, so you have to prioritize things. So this little tool is specifically populated with things that are relevant for the continuous security dashboard. So if you want to understand your continuous security dashboard requirements, you just go down the list. How important are these items to you? Where are you now? What's your score? And that'll tell you whether or not you really need a continuous security dashboard or not, and help you give some, if you like, somewhat qualitative, somewhat quantitative view of that, so that it can help you direct your efforts and use it to justify actions, whether you want to.
Well, it shines a light on where where you need to work. What's important and what you're weak in, and that combination is bad source of vulnerability. I think we have a poll now. So Cody, if you want to bring up the actual poll, here you go.
And this poll reads, to what extent does your organization need a continuous security dashboard that covers visibility over both DevSecOps and SRE production environments? A, not sure or don't know. B, major requirements for a continuous security dashboard. C, some important requirements for a continuous security dashboard. D, minor requirements. Or E, we have no need for a security dashboard.
Yeah, I think understanding a little bit about what it provides, and then looking at your own, scenario. I would expect most people would feel a need for a continuous security dashboard. Mark, what would you say?
I hope so. Maybe now that folks that are on the call know what it is a little more, then I think this is something that I believe once people understand it, they generally say, yeah, we do need that. But because usually folks are coming at their roles from either prod or dev or from a security role, they often haven't thought it through. But if you think about the total picture, hopefully we've explained it, then you begin to realize, that we really do have, this is important. So I would imagine by this point in the presentation, people are going to say they do have at least some important requirements, if not major requirements. We'll see what the survey says. It'd be interesting to know, we almost should have done a before and after of this poll, because I imagine it would have been don't know.
We did we had a familiarity with the concept in general, which was relatively light. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, well, it looks like this is pretty key. About a third of the folks, half of them are either some or major requirements. So I'd say that this strikes a chord there, Mark. So more discussions on this topic for sure.
Yes, good. Yeah, that's what I'd expect.
Okay. Well, we've talked about value stream management being consistent, and I mentioned some of this when we were looking at the architecture. But if we look at the top and we see the same use cases and same security capabilities that were layered across the top of the continuous security dashboard architecture, you see on the bottom the various capabilities. These are all your connectors. This is the architecture of value stream management right in the middle. You have the integration and common data model, which serves up and underpins an orchestration layer, so you can actually remediate and orchestrate, in this case, security events, and make sure that I'm connecting the production side to the dev side and vice versa, and then serving that up in an analytics layer. These three colored stripes in the middle are right out of the value stream management architecture that we have. I think the parallel is pretty incredible, Mark. I think we've made that point, but I just can't imagine anything fitting more perfectly than value stream management as the underpinning infrastructure to a continuous security dashboard.
Yeah, the first time I saw your architecture, I was smiling because we weren't really talking about security at the time, but that's what I was thinking. Like, oh God, you actually have exactly the kind of architecture needed to implement continuous security. And at the time, many people weren't thinking about continuous security; they were dealing with more basic things. But I think now it's getting more and more important. And you, it's great that you guys already have an architecture that is essentially a one-to-one fit with this need.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot here for us to play with. So,
Mhm.
as you think about value stream management applying to the problem, these are some of the capabilities, and this is a similar requirements prioritization score that we had before, but this is specific to the infrastructure, right, Mark?
Yeah, it's really just emphasizing, again, this is not meant to be an advertisement from my point of view, but it's remarkable to me how the continuous security dashboard requirements align with, architecture requirements align with the value stream management platform. It's
Yeah. Well, and with that in mind, Mark, I mean, as we near the end here, we'll wrap up in a couple minutes.
yeah,
But one of the things that always comes up is, okay, this is great. Half the audience is like, yep, this is either really important or very important. How do I get started?
yeah. So always I preach something called the 7-step transformation process. So pretty much can apply to any technical project, frankly. But it's doing something this big requires leadership, sponsorship. So it starts with making sure you get the leadership to understand what's going on. You can use these presentation slides to help do that, or involve a consultant or whatever, Plethora, to help with those conversations. But once you get alignment, then it's all about, all right, well, where are we now? What do we need? Go through the CDSR tool that we were talking about. Refine what areas are most important. Build a solution, choose a tool, build a model for that, implement. An example of that model, operationalize it, and validate that you now have something that's working, and then expand it to other applications. So that's the steps that I believe make sense. Don't just dive into implementation. That's usually the wrong thing to do, but it's always tempting to do that. Start with really getting alignment first around the concept.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we packed a lot in this. Cody, I'm gonna skip the last survey just due to time, and we'll go right into the key takeaways. And I think we've hit this mark, but this is really the core of what we hope to get across, right?
Yeah. So, it's basically pretty repetitive, but I think it's worth just repeating, the need for security, solutions over both the DevSecOps as well as pre-production, as well as SRE ops, that has never been greater. Tying together the production view of security with pre-production is the point, and applying, continuous improvement practices around that. The dashboard is really needed to get that visibility over the entire spectrum of activities in the value stream, from planning into operations and everything in the middle. The value stream management solutions have the right architecture to implement that. So you don't have to start from scratch. That's a great way to start your DevOps, your continuous security dashboard implementation. And use the roadmap approach to get there. So you don't have to, again, invent a process. Follow a logical process, and you're going to be more successful than if you just try to dive into an implementation without getting thinking it through.
That's right.
Getting alignment.
And we'll have a ebook coming soon. As mentioned up front at the top of the chat, there's a little sticky note, and there it is. You can reserve your copy. We'll have that out probably by the end of April, sometime in that neighborhood, about a month from now. And it will cover this and go into more detail on some of the underpinning concepts and thoughts. Mark, this has been awesome. What a great story. Great opportunity to take security to the next level by getting that view from idea to cash. And Cody, we should probably jump back to you to finalize things. And I'm going to thank you again, Mark, for your time and attention on this webinar.
Thank
Cody?
you.
Well, Bob and Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and for filling a full hour with content from beginning to end. So that was a packed webinar. So I really appreciate all the work and thought that went into it. I'd like to remind our audience that the session was recorded. So following this webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording. You'll also find the recording living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. So we do have 4 gift cards to be giving away. Our 4 winners are Pedri G, Maggie B, Alan J, and Kalpesh C. So congratulations to the 4 of you. Please keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. And if you don't receive an email, just check your spam folder. I would like to thank Plutora for sponsoring today's webinar. And my final thanks goes to you, our audience. We really appreciate you being here with us today. Please take a moment to fill out our post-webinar survey, and we hope to see you at an upcoming Techstrong Learning webinar. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Mark, Bob, thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Cody. Thanks again, Mark. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Good luck.